Welcome to Makeup and Monarchies. My name is Tiffany. I am a cosmetologist, hairstylist, makeup artist, and lover of all things medieval UK history. We're talking Battle of Bosworth today, and this is going to be the end of part 1 or season 1, I don't know, of War of the Roses. We actually are coming up on the anniversary of the Battle of Bosworth that took place on August 22nd of 1485. So I wanted to kind of like pause or end our first part of War of the Roses here with this. I've been doing this for a little bit over a month. So we're going to talk about that today. And I will be creating this makeup look, and I'm going to list all the products I'm using. They're down below. If you are new here and you have not yet subscribed, please do me a solid and subscribe. It really helps, and we're gaining some momentum here on YouTube. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you would be so kind to leave a comment or even just pop an emoji down in the comments. The commenting helps with the algorithm, so it boosts me a little bit. If you have noticed, I did do my hair a little bit darker. This is going to be my autumnal hair. Yeah, I did it this morning. I'm still getting used to it because it was really light before. Well, it was like a light ginge before. But anyways, with all of that being said, let's get into the Battle of Bosworth. Let's go. Hello. My face is an absolute garbage place right now because hormones. Fun. Anyways, we're going to set the scene. It's August of 1485. Richard III is king. I also just tanned, so I'm looking a little weird. So Richard's king. Henry Tudor has just landed at Mill Bay in Milford Haven. I said that with my Boston accent, and I apologize. Which is in Wales. He was in exile in France for 14 years. The Yorks and Lancastrians have been at each other's throats for over 30 years at this point. Richard's finagled his way to become king and basically left England in complete upheaval. Oh, I wasn't supposed to wear this today. Hold on, I'm gonna go change. I'll be right back. Okay, back into... So Richard had his brother's most noble and supporter executed after he became king, as well as Henry Stafford, who was the Duke of Buckingham. England was a shit show. I did an episode on Richard a while ago, and I will leave the link down below if you want to go watch and see what happens. So I haven't really covered Henry Tudor other than like talking about him in Elizabeth of York episode, or like scattered, throughout like the Henry VIII series I did, because that was his son. But he had been exiled in France with his paternal uncle Jasper Tudor since they had been named traitors by Edward IV. They had tried to flee France once, and the winds were so bad that it forced them to land in Brittany. They couldn't make it back to England. So they were taken into custody of Francis II, Duke of Brittany. Francis saw Henry as a tool to bargain with for England's aid in conflicts with France. So at this time, Brittany is a separate entity than France. So he kept Jasper and Henry under his protection. Obviously not just because he was being nice. The Tudor boys and their men tried again to get to England and attempted landing on October 10th of 1483. When he reached the coast at either Plymouth or Poole, a group of soldiers waved them in to come to shore. These soldiers were Richard's men trying to trick the Tudors. They had been ordered to capture Henry once he set foot on England's soil. I'm doing a really easy eye today. It's a little dramatic. We're talking about a battle, and like a really popular one at that. So, but easy, simple, dramatic. So Henry didn't buy it and went back to Brittany, completely abandoning the planned invasion. The weather's very Welsh today. I do apologize, but it's muggy as shit, and that thing is way too fucking loud to have on while I'm doing this, so sorry about the noise. The survivors of the failed uprising went to Brittany, where they supported Henry's claims. So this uprising was why Henry Stafford had been executed. So everybody that supported him went to Brittany and backed Henry in his claim to the throne. I'm not going to get into what I think about Henry's claim to the throne, but whatever. So that Christmas, Henry Tudor swore an oath in Rennes Cathedral to marry Elizabeth of York, who was Edward IV and Elizabeth Woodville's oldest child. And this marriage would unite the houses of York and Lancaster. This made Henry a threat to Richard, and Richard in turn made several proposals to Francis to surrender Henry. Francis refused and held out for a possibly better offer from Richard. But come 1484, Francis was extremely ill, and his treasurer took over control of the government. Pierre Lunday reached an agreement with Richard that he would send Henry back to England in exchange for military and financial aid. The Bishop of Flanders, John Morton, got wind of this and let the Tudor boys know, who then fled to France. They were allowed to stay and became useful pawns to make sure that England didn't interfere with Francis's plans to take over Brittany. So Anne Neville, Richard's wife, died in March of 85. After this, rumors started circulating that Richard was planning to marry his niece Elizabeth of York. But in reality, he was trying to wed Joanna of Portugal and wed Elizabeth to Manuel, Duke of Beja. This put Henry in a bad position. His promise to marry Elizabeth would wash away any alliance between his supporters and those who were loyal to Edward IV. Henry left France and set sail for England on August 1st. He landed at Milne Bay in Milford Haven, Wales, with a force between 2,000 and 5,000 men. Henry and his army made their way to Haverfordwest in Pembrokeshire. Richard's lieutenant, so I just did it's black eyeshadow from MAC called Carbon, and I'm just blending this out a little bit with a brush that has been previously used with Charcoal Brown by MAC. So I just wanted to kind of diffuse that line and blend that out. Then I'm going to go back in with the charcoal or the carbon color, and I'm going to just pull this line out a little bit, because when I do my wing, it's going to just diffuse that a teeny bit. Richard's lieutenant in South Wales, Sir Walter Herbert, didn't move against Henry. Two of Walter's officers switched sides and joined Henry and his men. Rhys Thomas joined Henry as well, taking a southern route to Henry's northern path. Rhys recruited more men on his way and got around 500 to 2,000 men, enlarging Henry's army even more. By the 15th or 16th of August, Henry and his force crossed over into England's border and headed to the town of Shrewsbury. Richard had been aware, I'm glad I just did what I did off camera, because my whole bottle of pump for my foundation just shit the bed in front of my eyes. So Richard had been aware of Henry's coming and invasion and ordered his lords to keep a level of, readiness. Richard got wind of Henry's landing on August 11th. On August 16th, the York army started to gather. John Howard, first Duke of Norfolk, yes, that Howard family. John was the maternal great-grandfather of Anne Boleyn. John left for Leicester that night. The city of York sent for instructions from Richard and sent 80 men to join him. At the same time, Henry Percy, 4th Earl of Northumberland, gathered his men and made his way to Leicester. Now, I want to pause here and talk about the Stanley brothers for a minute. They were a set of brothers, Thomas and William, who had been mainly Lancastrian. William had fought at the Battle of Blore Heath in 59 and helped William Hastings put down an uprising against Edward IV in 71. When Richard usurped the throne, I'm going to say that because he fucking did. He took it when he shouldn't have. Anyways, William stayed by his side and didn't join the Duke of Buckingham's rebellion, which he was rewarded for. But his older brother, Thomas, wasn't as loyal. By 85, Thomas had served 3 kings, Henry VI, Edward IV, and Richard III. Now, Tommy here had calculated and political direction. He would balance on both sides until there was like a clear winner. And this worked out pretty well for him. He had been Henry's Chamberlain and then Edward's steward. However, while Edward was king, Thomas and Richard didn't see eye to eye. Thomas had married Margaret Beaufort, Henry Tudor's mother, in 1472. This did not help his relationship with Richard. Even though things were good between the two, when Richard became king, Thomas didn't join Buckingham's rebellion as well, just like his brother didn't. And Margaret Beaufort was spared in the ordeal. Richard still took her titles and her lands and gave them to Thomas to hold for the Yorkist crown. I think that's a really weird thing to do. I don't understand it. If somebody wants to leave a comment below as to why Richard would take the wife's things and give it to the husband, especially at that time when, I don't know, I think it's a weird move. This could have been Richard trying to mend fences with Thomas. There was a thing about a land dispute that Richard was going to overturn, not in favor of Thomas. And right before the Battle of Bosworth happens, Richard took Thomas's son, George Stanley, held him hostage so that Thomas wouldn't join his stepson in the battle. Henry and his crew rested in Shrewsbury and then went and met up with Sir George Talbot and other English allies that deserted Richard's forces. Even with all these newbies, Henry was still outnumbered. He slowly made his way through Staffordshire to gain more recruits. Henry had been communicating with his stepfather Thomas and his step-uncle William, Stanley Bros, before he got back to England, and the brothers got their forces ready once Henry landed. They had put themselves ahead of Henry's march and met with him in secret twice. Not so much of a secret now. The second meeting in Warwickshire, they told Henry that Richard had planned for a battle and that he wasn't far off. On August 21st, the brothers made camp, as did Henry. Now we're going to scoot back to Richard. On August 20th, he rode from Nottingham to Leicester and joined up with John Howard, Duke of Norfolk, and spent the night at the Blue Boar Inn. Henry Percy got there the next day, and the Royal Army, oh, I have a hair right there. The Royal Army went west to cut off Henry's route to London. The army passed Sutton Cheney, and Richard moved towards Ambion Hill. It is originally thought that Richard was positioned on top of Ambion Hill and Henry at the bottom, western side, with the Stanley camp being to the north. It's now thought that Richard was actually positioned between Sutton Cheney and Stapleton. Henry Tudor was more than likely to the west of Richard, and the Stanleys were between the two camps to the south. And if you want to learn more about this, because I'm not going to go in depth, there's more information here. I've listed down below a link to watch Matt Lewis on History Hits channel on YouTube. Matt Lewis went to the battlegrounds. What's the word I want? It's not a museum, but anyways, if you want to learn more about this, the link is down below. Go watch Matt talk about this. The York army is estimated to have been between 7,500 and 12,000 men. From his position, he could see the area with nothing in the way. Okay, this looks way brighter because it's not sunny out today. It's actually way better lighting too. Anywho, the Stanleys had between 4,000 and 6,000 men. Now, Henry's army is estimated to be between 5,000 and 8,000 men. In their positions, Richard sent a message to Thomas that he was going to kill his son if Thomas didn't join in the attack on Henry. Would you like to know this dad's response to that? He said if he was going to kill his son, no. He said that he had other sons and didn't join. This obviously pissed Richard off and ordered George to be executed. Richard's officers convinced him that it would be more convenient to carry out executions after the battle. Henry had also sent a message to the brothers, and the response was non-committal, and saying that they would naturally come after Henry gave them orders to his men and set them up for battle. This left Henry with no choice but to confront Richard and his forces alone. So I do love this highlighter, but I will say that it does leak a bit. So I just, honestly, because it will come out, I think the hole in here is too tiny, but that's my... So the battle started, and Henry handed the command over to John de Vere, Earl of Oxford. Henry's men were ordered to not stray further than 10 feet from their banners so they didn't get enveloped by Richard's men. Richard's cannons were going off, and John made their way through the marsh. John Howard and other parts of Richard's group that were under the command of Sir Robert Brackenbury advanced. Arrows started flying and hand-to-hand combat started. Several of John Howard's men deserted and a senior officer was killed. Richard could see his men were at a disadvantage and then signaled for Henry Percy to help, but they didn't move. Richard led a charge of men on horseback around the battle and towards Henry in the back of his group. Men were killed, and Henry concealed himself, making no attempt to fight. Henry was bought sometime from his pike equipped men who slowed Richard's pace. Henry's bodyguards surrounded him and kept him away from Richard. While Richard was occupied with Henry's men, William Stanley rode out to help Henry. Richard and his men were now outnumbered and surrounded. They were pushed back several hundred yards from Henry and now were on the edge of the marsh where Richard's horse was toppled. Richard was on the ground and gathered who he had left, refusing to retreat, and ended up losing several men. I'm just going to pause this for a minute, and I'm just going to talk. I don't really talk about my stuff that often, but so I am 40 and overplucked in the early 2000s, so I have very little of my eyebrows left. Well, it's not very little, but they're not as thick as I wish they were. So I really like this MAC Fibre gel because it builds, like, as you can see, I do have a little, like, the hair I have in the front here is really, really blonde, so you can't see it, but you can build your brows up more, and I love this. So just wanted to highlight this stuff for a second. It's really great. So if you are struggling with your brows and you just want them a little bit more fluffier and like a little bit more volume to them, this is a great product for that. Richard came really close to Henry, but was then surrounded by William's men. Richard was killed. Now, we know from when his body was found in 2012 that he had 11 wounds and 9 of them were on his skull. He had 2 holes at the base of his skull, which were probably what killed him. Based on the injuries on his head, it's assumed that he lost his helmet during battle. So the battle itself only lasted around 2 hours. Once word had spread that Richard had been killed, the battle fell apart. Henry Percy went north and John Howard was killed. Henry was proclaimed king and Richard's circlet was placed on his head. The difference between a circlet and a crown is the first is mainly just the base of the crown. It's said only 100 of Henry's men died in this battle, whereas Richard lost around 1,000. Richard's body was stripped and then strapped across a horse. His body was brought to Leicester and was displayed to prove that he was unalive. After 2 days, his body was put into a plain tomb in the Church of the Greyfriars. The church was demolished thanks to Richard's great nephew, Henry VIII, so the location was lost. However, in 2012, it was found. I've talked about this in my Richard III episode, and you can also check out the video here on YouTube of Turi King discussing the findings of his discovered body. She is a DNA analyst, and it's about an hour long. She's great to listen to, and it's really interesting. Richard was interred into Leicester Cathedral on March 26th of 2015. I'm going to pop off and do my mascara and plug in my curling iron. I'll be right back. So Henry established his rule in England. Parliament reversed his attainder and made Richard's kingship illegal, even though his reign stayed officially in the annals of England. The proclamation of Edward IV's children being made illegitimate were also reversed, making Elizabeth of York a royal princess again. Henry also had Parliament backdate his reign to be the day before the battle so he could declare traitors. Henry rewarded the Stanleys super generously. William was made his chamberlain, and Thomas, his stepfather, was given back his lands, was made Earl of Derby, and given grants and offices in other estates. John de Vere was given back his lands and titles that the Yorks had yeeted. He was made Constable of the Tower and Admiral of England, Ireland, and Aquitaine. Jasper Tudor was made Duke of Bedford, and Henry gave his mother all the lands and titles that had been stripped from her by Richard. Henry and Elizabeth were married on January 18th of 1486. This united the houses of Lancaster and York, thus ending the War of the Roses. Now, there was a reenactment of the battle that happens every year, and that took place this past weekend. Something I would love to attend, hopefully one day. I'm gonna finish curling my hair, and then I'll be back with fun facts and with my lipstick on. I'll be back. Okay, so I curled my hair. I put on red lipstick because I was only in cash room. We're gonna wear red today. I also curled my hair. I've let it cool a little bit because obviously this took a while, so I'm just gonna put a little bit of this mending infusion from the Moroccan oil, emulsify it in my hands, and just run through the curls just so I get more of that loose curl look. So let's do fun facts for the Battle of Bosworth. This was Henry's second attempt at taking England. It actually wasn't called the Battle of Bosworth until 25 years later, and it didn't take place in Bosworth. Richard is said to have been offered a horse after he fell, but refused, and reported to have said, "This day I will die as king or win." So, like I said earlier, I'm going to link some videos down below if you want to learn some more about the battle. That is all I have for this episode. If you enjoyed it, please hit the thumbs up. If you want to leave a comment down below for me and let me know what you liked about it, or what you didn't know, or what you learned, or whatever, or just leave an emoji, because that really helps with the algorithm here on YouTube. Like I said in the beginning, I've listed all the products I've used down below. If you have not subscribed yet, please subscribe for me. And you can also find me on Instagram and TikTok at Makeup and Monarchies. Also, if this is something that you enjoy and you would like to help support me, you can head on over to buymeacoffee.com/Makeup and Monarchies and help with my Starbucks addiction. So that's about it for this week. I am going to be taking a little bit of a break for a week or two. We are coming up on back to school season, so it's going to get a little crazy in my house with new routine and all that jazz. So I think what I'm going to do is come back and we're going to talk about hair, but in the medieval time, and like what the styles were. And I find that fascinating as well. So with all of that, that's it for this week. I hope that you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.